Guys, welcome to Rainmakers podcast. Your host, Nick Nascimento. I have the infamous Kris Krohn, my mentor, on the show today. And this is a huge opportunity for me and excited to unpack how this guy's brain works, his history in business, in real estate. Kris, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome, Nick, man. Glad to be here.
I love it. So let me give you guys a quick intro on Kris, and I don't even think this will do justice. So Kris and I met about 1.5 years ago. I went to his event. Okay, I was at a point in my life at a crossroads where I'm like, okay, I need a mentor and I need a next level guy. And I was considering people like Cardone, Kris Krohn, Russell Brunson. And I'm like, you know what? Kris has one local, and I seem to align with a lot of his stuff. And so anyways, I felt called to go. Long story short, I got connected with Kris by contributing to his charity, and Kris got a lot of proximity, gave me proximity to him, and has absolutely changed my life. And so Kris has over $2 billion in transactions in real estate. Kris, when I met you, you had owned over 100 companies with equity, and now it's over 400, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Okay. So people look at you as a real estate tycoon, which you are. But I know the Kris Krohn behind the scenes, and I'm excited to uncover that a little bit. I've seen the man behind the curtains with his family on private jets. I've seen him, on our trips to New Jersey, Texas, in his office, at home, all the above. And what I admire most is how Kris builds culture and his obsession with human development and developing leaders within his organization and outside of his organization and empowering people. And so anyways, Kris, so excited to have you. Kris is a phenom with his health, his relationships. This is the guy who has inspired me to do everything I've done so far. So Kris, thank you for taking the time to be here.
Absolutely, brother. Dude, let's have a blast.
Let's go, baby. Okay. So, Kris, one thing I wanted to jump into right off the bat was people ask me to this day, like, hey, Nick, does Kris still mentor you? And I say, no, he doesn't. Because he doesn't need to. And Kris, when I had you pinned on that jet, on those several jet rides we had, I got to just pound you with questions, and you couldn't go anywhere, so you couldn't escape it. And every time I asked you a question, you never directly answered the question. And at first it was kind of annoying, I'm like, Kris, just give me the fish. But every time you told me a story and proceeded to teach a principle. And because of that, I now have these lessons and these principles and guidelines and frameworks that have helped me in so many scenarios in business and my personal life. And so with that, why, do you remember those times what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. I know what you're talking about. There are reasons why I don't give people answers.
I know. And I learned it. So, what fuels you, Kris, to invest in other people and to develop them? Like, why is that so important to you?
So most people live in a very linear world where all they can do is what they can do. And so we're all limited by that pesky 24-hour clock, 1,440 minutes a day, 168 hours a week. And so the only way to get more out of your life at some point is to clone yourself. And so building, we don't like to use that word clone. We use a different word. It's culture, which is I am finding like-minded people that I can hold to certain standards that I can rely on to do things. And so I invest in people because it's interesting. There's this guy in my company who every time there's a hard project that he has to do, he could delegate it. And he just says, it's just quicker and easier to do it myself. And there's a lot of people out there that's their mindset. It's just easier to do it myself. And you will always live a small life as long as you do that. The only way to expand is to slow down to go faster. And slowing down means document what you're doing and train your people and inspire your people so that ultimately they can become free thinkers that can represent you in what is being built, scaled, and expanded.
I love that, Kris. Just to piggyback on what you're saying about culture. I remember, I think we were going to Texas on the jet, and I asked you, I was telling you about like my goals for the year, and it was, make $1 million, go be the chief rainmaker. At the time I was president of the solar company, which I completely failed at. Yeah, we learned so much. And, but you encouraged me, and not just directly to me, but also with other people. I noticed, say, hey, go make the million, but go transform your body, Nick, go transform your health, and go transform your relationships. Go build and forge new relationships that last, that are meaningful. And, there was no filter. That the difference with the mentorship you had to me, Kris, there was no filter. I took what you said, I did it. And I can tell now, looking back, I know why you challenged me to do that, because I've seen how it's developed me in all these areas of my life. And because of the investment in my health, in my relationships, and still pursuing and getting, I fell short of the million, but came very close. But because of that, I've been able to achieve so much more with attracting higher level people into the business, right? Solar companies on pace for 15 to 20 million. Coaching business has taken off. And most importantly, my relationships in my life have transformed, gained 25 pounds of muscle. But what you taught me, and you teach a lot of people, is you don't have to choose between success financially in wealth and the other areas of your life.
Life and society basically say that balance it's a myth. It's not really achievable because we're all so busy. And one of my rules in life is I'm never allowed to say I'm too busy. All that means is that I overcommit myself and I can't manage my time. So instead, it's like I have all the time in the world for all the right choices. And I've noticed I don't want to stick my head in a garbage can to find out if it stinks. And that means that I love learning by proxy other people's mistakes. And it's interesting. I meet one person who has achieved great wealth, but then went through an awful divorce and is miserable. I meet another person who's achieved great wealth, but they've treated their body very, very poorly, and they won't really get to enjoy their wealth. And so it just seems super reasonable to me that there are three categories of life that we need to be able to balance every single day, because ultimately our destiny is forged by what we do daily, which means every day am I investing in my body, every day I'm investing in my relationships, and am I investing in my finances. And when I say relationships, I want to throw out this caveat that outside of me, the most important relationship that I'm connecting with is not my wife or my children or my friends or my coworkers, it's God. And so this idea of maintaining the relationships that matter most, and then taking care of our body, and then developing our finances, I find that when people can balance that triangle, they seem to have it all. Like they're balanced, they're well-rounded, and they don't live with this regret of, well, I put too much energy over here and I've ignored another area of my life. So it's like, okay, well, then don't be disproportionately successful. Be successful in all three areas.
Yeah. And Kris, I know from personal experience, like I failed. I've divorced, failed with my marriage. My health wasn't good, but I crushed it with sales, right? And so this spoke to me when you talked about this, integrity and other things that they hit to the, my soul. And this topic of like slowing down to accelerate. Last year, I went from, the year prior managing 130 plus people to managing just myself. So I totally scaled back, went all in on my sales, my investing, went all in on my fitness, copied your systems, hired coaches, and same with the relationships. And what I can tell now, and that we're duplicating with our coaching company, is that same process for other people. Because that same going down to the root of everything is exactly why I've seen so much more this last year. So thank you for that. And on that topic, I wanted to ask you, so Tony Robbins was a mentor for you. Tony always preaches that a lot of our community, Kris, is salespeople, entrepreneurs. Tony says the best salespeople aren't trained, they're found. And I do agree with that. And I have my reasoning for that, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So
like why is that? Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah. So I think what Tony might actually be saying there is not necessarily that you're either born with salesmanship or not, but rather that developing a good salesman, that takes time. Yeah. And so you have to ask yourself, if I'm hiring someone for a job, am I going to hire an expert, or am I going to pay for someone to get a paid internship? Because if I'm going to pay you to do a sales job and it's really an internship because you're not good at it, shame on me as a business owner. Find good salespeople is just, it's going to be, take sales out of it and just think for a moment, I'm trying to find a CEO to run my company. And I have two choices. One is a friend from the good old days who's not really qualified, but he's my buddy and he'll figure it out. He'll become a CEO in time. And the other one is to go find someone that has built your size of company 5 times over, is up for the challenge, up for the task, has blueprints, codes, knows how to do it. Like, who would you pick? Yeah. And And so obviously you'd pick the more qualified person, and yet there are reasons why we sometimes make stupid moves. So I think what Tony really might be saying there is, go find the people that have already discovered their brilliance in the game of sales, that have already paid the price to do it well, and go bring those people on. And that'll probably be a lot faster than developing salespeople.
Agreed. And, this goes back to what you taught me with investing in yourself, slowing down to invest in yourself, because if you can become that, what I'm saying is you can attract higher level people that you can't even imagine you would attract.
Well, that's what the whole game of personal development is all about. When we had all those mentoring sit downs, and I wouldn't directly answer your question, it's because the most powerful answer is inside of you. And the question is, can I lay out the principles and the thoughts and ideas that will allow you to basically uncover the blind spot or develop the skill or the ability? I was at a retreat last week, and it was 4 days, and this was like doing deep inner work. And I'm part of a group of people that I trust, that I really lean into. And while I was going through this, two of the mentors came up to me and said, "Hey, you have this monster blind spot, and we're going to be doing this process tonight. Let's help you through." I said, "Tell me the blind spot." And they said, "We won't do that." I said, "Come on, just I paid you all this money. Just tell me the blind spot." They said, "I promise if you can discover it on your own, it will stick with you forever." And so, I reciprocate what I receive. And that's been a big part of my process, because when I finally came across it and found out what that blind spot was, man, it sunk so deep to my core that it really it changed me from the inside out.
I love that, Kris. It's amazing, dude. So one thing that's so like prevalent with you is your energy, and I'm obsessed with it. And I remember you telling me that like you didn't take Adderall, you didn't take stimulants like that. And I'm like, there's no way. And I saw you.
No caffeine.
Yeah. And I'm like, at first I couldn't believe it, but then seeing you throughout the whole day, night, morning, I'm like, okay, he's not kidding, So energy, enthusiasm is infectious with business, with sales. Like, it's a transfer of energy. How can our people, like, if you're advising salespeople, like, how can they learn that skill faster? How can they develop and maintain high levels of energy without the uses of substances?
Yeah, so it's about cultivating energy. A lot of people just want it to be there, but they haven't actually built it. And that would be equivalent to, signing up for a bodybuilding competition and not getting ready for it and not lifting any weights, and then showing up and expecting to do really well. And a lot of people just think you can fake it till you make it. But I actually hate that phrase so much, because, the truth is, we are just exactly who we are. So you have to have a routine to create energy if you want to expend energy, if you want to have energy. And my morning routine is how I create that energy. It's where I go to cultivate it. It starts at 4 a.m. I wake up and I pound about 20 minutes on an audiobook while I'm getting ready and hitting my private gym. At the gym, I'll do cardio. And while I'm doing that, I'll be hitting an active meditation for 30 minutes. So it's like, okay, I've cultivated my mind. Now I've been connecting to God and really wakening up to my higher self. Then after that, I'm going to go hit the weights and I'm going to lift with a handful of buddies. After hitting the weights, I'm going to spend time with my wife and work on our relationship. And then I'm going to spend time with my kids. By the time the morning is over, I expended a ton of physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, spiritual energy, and relationship energy. And from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m., 5 hours has passed. But by 9 a.m., while most people are just getting ready to get up and go to work, like, I feel full of energy. In fact, it's kind of weird. I put on events. I have an event center in Provo, Utah. And I put on frequent events. And one of the things that I'll do is I'll ask the audience just to raise their hand and show with the number of fingers, where their energy level's at. And out of 5, people raise their hand and say, "Oh, I'm a 3 or I'm a 2. And then I'll take 30 seconds and have them jump up and down, run around the room, do some push-ups. And then afterwards, after expending all that energy, I'll ask what your energy level's at. And they're always at a 5. And so the weird thing about energy is you have to spend it to get it. And the people that are trying to conserve it don't have it. And so my morning routine about cultivating energy is about spending it on all of these different modalities and levels. And then it is a chosen process. Like, energy doesn't come from sleep. It doesn't come from food. It comes from choice, which means that during the day, like when I'm charismatic, like, that's a choice. And when I'm expressing all that energy, that's a choice. So then it becomes something that you practice, because in life you do get what you practice.
I love that, Kris. It's amazing. Yeah. Your morning. See, this is a hot topic. I admire Alex Hormozy, but at the same time, there's some things when he talks about morning routine and not needing it, just work. If you want to become Elon Musk, then sure. But what I see is that lack of fulfillment. This is why I've always admired you. is the development behind the scenes, who you're becoming. And what you taught me is you can have it all. Your most recent book, Have It All, or one of the most recent books.
Mm-hmm.
It's the power that you can have all those things in those three pillars of life: health, wealth, relationships, and they can fuel each other.
Yeah.
And the way I've seen it this last year is filling my cup first in the morning, personally, physical, mental, spiritual. And I go to the day I've already won. So I have no expectation. I'm divorced from results. People tell me no on the doors or with appointments. I'm good. My cup's filled and I have a lot more to give, so I can empathize and connect higher with people better. So I love that. I was going to ask you too, what, with, personal development and sales, like what is the correlation from your mind with those two things, with sales and salespeople?
So if you just take a look at selling period, you're either relying on skills that you've already developed because you've cultivated the talent from years of messing up, doing it wrong, learning how to overcome objections, right? The people who become best in sales, it's not the hardest worker. And the person that increases their talent the most is the person that is constantly asking, how do you do that better? Like, is there a better script? How do you overcome that objection for this product, for this type of person? And what makes sales really, really tricky in general is you have all these avatars. Like Myers-Briggs has 64 different personalities. And when you get on the door, you talk to someone, you don't know what personality you're going to get. You don't know their background, their gender, the socioeconomic status. And you don't know if they've got warrior energy, healer energy, blueprint energy. And so that means that you have to actually learn how to overcome objections, not for one person 20 times, but there's 64 different people. So you have to learn hundreds of ways of talking to different people to really customize a sales experience. The people that get best at sales are those that do two things. Number one is they're always asking, how do I do it better? Even the people that are the best are still saying, oh, if I talk to this personality and I know that I have an 85% chance of overcoming that objection, I want to know how to do it at 90% or 95%. So they're just constantly asking, how do I get better at the game? But the second thing that they do is they bring positive energy. The correlation between personal development and sales is really, really simple. Yeah. It is about managing your state. And so people that, a different way of looking at that is take a look at the word positive and negative, right? There's positive and negative people. There's half glass empty, glass half full. Well, the human being has recorded 70,000 thoughts a day. And if we've got 10, 15 words per sentence in our mind per thought, we're using close to 1 million words a day in our mind. And just for arbitrary sake, imagine that every word had a point value that was positive or negative, like love is positive and hate is negative. And let's just say that you could tease everything into a positive or negative, a +1 or -1. Okay. Well, if you look at the average human being at the end of the day and say, what was your score? Because you used 1 million words in your mind and 480,000 of them were negative and 520,000 of them were positive, which means that your negative to positive ratio is kind of at a break even. Let me tell you about a break even person. They have ups and they have downs. They have good days and they have bad days. Often things are going awful and sometimes things are going okay. And if you're in sales, you can't afford that mindset. It's too pathetic and it's too weak. A salesperson, every time they get on the door, has to get themselves back into a good state. So in sales, you have to figure out how 90%, maybe 95% of your internal language and self-talk actually ranks positive versus negative. Because you get on the door and then someone says no, and then you say, I'm discouraged. The next door, you're like, that's okay. It'll be different on the next door, and you discourage yourself again. If you have, we know in sales, you're going to get way more no's than yeses. Most human beings, they can't tolerate that. The reason why they suck at sales and the reason why they fail is not because there's a problem with the product or the experience or the client or the leads. It's always the leads, the prospects. No, the problem is your stinking thinking. Yeah. The reality is, if you can use language to tear yourself down, you're going to create a bad experience on the door. And that's because in most sales situations, you're acting as a mirror, which means that when you're talking to someone, I would never bring crazy high energy to a very low energy soul, but I bring more energy than they're bringing, which means that I can pace them and I can feel where they're at and I can connect with them. And by the way, when they're negative or disparaging, it doesn't turn me off and it doesn't turn me down. That's the correlation between not just personal development, but the ability to hold a positive state in an environment where you're failing.
That's amazing. What everything you said, I can vouch is spot on. Why that first point you said, always asking how I can do it better. I've noticed this with myself. I'm always trying to improve. And so I feel like no matter what happens in the day, I'm always winning, right? That mantra, everything goes my way. Why is it, Kris, that if you had to pinpoint it, why do salespeople not do that? Like, why are they getting in their head and stop, like, not trying to improve, or like, how can I do it better? Why do they see it in a negative light?
Well, first of all, we're all trained to have this mentality of I'll do it by myself. We're lone wolves. We don't want help. We don't want to ask for help. Sales is often largely driven by male hierarchy, meaning there's just a lot of men in that industry. And masculine hierarchy is a funny thing. The moment we feel like our confidence has been eroded, we're worthless in any kind of sales role, which means we've got to have our confident, hyped up. We've got to be feeling good, and you can't fake it, like I said earlier, which means you have to genuinely be able to create it. So the lone wolf syndrome is always just like, I got it. It's all on me, and I know what I need to do. And the problem is what you know can only get you more of what you've gotten. So if you want results you don't have yet, you can't blow harder at what you've done. You actually have to create new input. You have to get new stuff. And so, people will say things like, well, have a morning routine or read positive books. And I'm like, before you even do any of that, just never be satisfied with what you think you know. What you think you know will never be enough. Like if you act on that premise, because the ego says, I know. The ego says, I got it. And the problem with I got it is you're turned off to all learning. You're done. But if you want to, hey, I'm in a sales job, I want to double my income or triple my income, or I want to hit the sales goal, it's like, cool. Then the most important thing you do outside of just maintaining a positive state is you have to learn what you don't know, because what you don't know is the most dangerous information keeping you from your goal.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's crazy. Dude, you are just a mastermind. Kris, with your experience in sales, you did a sales gig in your early 20s, right?
I did. Yeah. Phone sales.
Like what correlate, looking back, was that wasted time? Was that, like, obviously you were trying to escape that. You hated it, right?
There was a time when I hated it. And then when I saw that it was the stepping stone to creating the life that I've created, I got actually really excited about it, and I got after it. The first year on the job, I really didn't do that great at sales. I struggled. I struggled in my mindset. And then a mentor said, hey, you could actually stay with this job 14 more months and you'll qualify to buy your first house. And you got to save some money in the bank and you got to develop your credit. And I was like, okay, if I get a different job outside of sales, I have to start over my 2-year track record. So I'm halfway in almost. I'm just going to stay here. And if I'm going to stay here, I need to mentally check in instead of checking out. And I decided to become great at it. And that next year, I more than doubled my income. And that put me in a position to buy my first home. And I lived in that home for free because I rented out the basement that covered my mortgage. And that gave me confidence so that I doubled my income again the next year in my sales job. And now everyone I tell, I'm like, hey, like whatever mastery you're going to stack on top of itself, like you have to start with some type of lucrative career that you can control the financial outcome on. And sales is honestly, from street smarts, is one of the easiest things to do, right? I mean, if you have it in you to go be a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist, those are jobs where you can make several $100,000 a year, but you got to pay a price and a lot of money to get in that game, and you're going to take a decade. Sales will still require time, but not as much for the person who's really hungry and ready.
I love that, Kris. On the real estate game and investing game, you've opened my mind about the single digit, double digit, triple digit, and quadruple digit ROI. With our people at Sparta Solar, and then a lot of people in our coaching program, I teach the people of our own company. I cut them a check. I say 20% go to assets that cash flow, real estate, double digit, and then 20% to personal development, investing yourself, so quadruple digit. And when you get enough cash, then sure, play the triple digit game. For salespeople, and I know the incomes vary, but for people that are on this podcast, they're usually pushing past 6 figures. So between 100K and $500,000. Where do you, and I know this varies, so I know it's a loaded question, but where do you advise that they invest their money?
So I look at real estate as like a foundation. And that basically says in 20 years, I'm going to be worth millions of dollars, and it's passive and it doesn't take my time. So I usually prioritize real estate first because it allows me to focus on my career. And so sequentially, it's smart. You get a career that makes you good money. You got to find investments that are passive. In the beginning, if you have a challenging career that you're growing at and you decide instead to buy and build a business on the side that takes your time, the two are going to compete with each other. Yeah. It's not a good idea. So real estate is really the foundation for building the wealth. Once you have real estate there, you can start putting things on it like non-owner occupied, absentee owner status businesses, things that you can own that still also make you money. You want to keep it really passive in the beginning because you really want to milk your career for the money that you can get out of it until your investments pass it up. And then you don't need your career anymore. Then you can shift and basically be a full-time investor or a part-time or a no-time investor, because bottom line, all your bills and your lifestyle is being paid for, by your passive investments.
You say that's the reasoning behind that, I would assume, is to create the freedom because you can operate at a different level when, those Maslow's hierarchy of needs they're all met, food, water, shelter, love. I feel like you can operate at a higher level of that creator genius to go do bigger and better things.
When my wife and I, when we were making about $250,000 a year, we were spending under $40,000 a year. And you just think about that for a minute. It's like someone making $250,000 a year, it's going to be normal for them to spend a couple $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, we made different choices in the beginning because we wanted the freedom, the ability to invest and basically do well enough that, we could have that peace of mind, have our investments perform and basically live life on our terms.
I love that. How do you feel about, like, you've taught me, hey, you can pay with time or you can pay with money to learn and develop new skills. How do you, in today's world, there's so many coaches, so many sales, trainings out there. What do you advise for the struggling rep that is saying, hey, I want to prove, I want to put my money in, you pay attention. What do you advise those people?
So I have a brand new book that came out. It's called Time Machine. And it's available for everyone listening here on freewealthgift.com. Just grab a copy of it. And what that book does is it talks about time arbitrage. And it basically says everyone's always trying to figure out how to make the most money so they can buy stuff. I'm actually doing the opposite. I'm always asking, how do I get my time back? And as I get my time back, I can redeploy it for more money. And then I use that money to buy other skills and people's abilities and things so that I can buy my time back. And so I'm constantly like, wealth for me literally grows as a game of, with what little time I have, how do I make the kind of money that I can, don't invest it, put it into something that gives you your time back. And so I feel like I've gotten my time back over and over and over and over and over again. And it means that my lifestyle continues to be everything that it is, but it doesn't necessarily need me. So it really is an ultimate freedom play. A lot of people think that money equals freedom, but it really, if you had to pick between time or money, it's going to start with time mastery. And so that book, Time Machine, is actually, I think, a great hack for anyone that it wants to become obsessed with how they use their time intelligently according to mathematical equations that will allow them to always make more money, but not spending more time doing it.
Yeah. Well, you can always get more money. You can't get more time. That's the thing. And Kris, so tell me, what was I going to ask you? Okay. So you might defer on your opinion here. I'm curious. Okay. I know Ryan Pineda agrees with this, but if people are making less than $250,000, I tell them don't invest like heavily in real estate or things like that. Like if you make $100K, for example, or $50K or $120K, invest into personal development, learning skills, go pay people that know something in your industry that you don't, so you can double, triple your income so you have more to invest. Would you agree with that? Or would you say diversify from the start?
So it's probably the last question that I have time for today. And what I would say, Nick, is I would do some of both. I believe that there's a lot of really great personal development options out there where you don't have to drop 25K or 100K on a mastermind. I think that there's a lot of really great options out there. Everyone should be reading personal development books and then be a part of a community or some kind of program. There's programs out there that range from, a few $1,000, on up to a lot, but I think there's room for doing that. And real estate, there's room for a lot of house hacking in the beginning when you don't have a lot of money, 3% down payment, buy a house, move again 2 years later, do it again. And so I think there's room to hit both of those. And I would recommend taking a look at both.
I love that. That's a good answer. Thank you, Kris. Thank you for the time, guys. Kris Krohn, you can follow him at just Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Kris, where's the best place they can find you?
Just whatever social media platform is your preference. I'm agnostic, so I use them all. Just go to kriskrohn.com. And then if you would like to get a free copy of my new book, just go to freewealthgift.com and grab that for yourself.
And the next UFD event, Kris, so people can go, because I've been there. It's amazing. Where can they find that? When's the next one?
If you go to kriskrohn.com, you'll definitely figure out when the next event's going to be. I've got one coming up in just a couple of weeks here, but they're always happening.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Kris. Appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.